Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I am here today with my May 2020 book wrap-up video. So these are going to be all of the books that I finished in the month of May. I have 4 graphic novels, 3 middle grade novels, and then 2 adult novels to talk about. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So first up is a graphic novel that I have been wanting to read for quite some time now. I've owned it for a very long time. I think I remember buying this back when I first started collecting graphic novels about, 10 to 12 years ago, I guess it was. And this is The Death of Superman. So, as it says on the top here, the best-selling graphic novel of all time. So, it was written by all these folks along the side here, if you can see that. So we have 7 different issues in here. You can see them all listed in the back. And they were not all from the same run. So, like, we have Superman, Man of Steel, Justice League of America is in here, Superman in Action Comics. So there's different runs. The Adventures of Superman. So different runs that have, been combined for this one series. And you can see the artwork here. This is from 93, and it's very early 90s style artwork, which typically I'm not a huge fan of in reality, but I think it's actually really well done here. I really like the opening panels of Doomsday breaking out. Just to give you an idea, I think these are really cool. They look really good. So basically, The Death of Superman is exactly what you think it is based on the title. It's just what it is. So we are following Superman as he's chasing Doomsday, who, of course, is one of the, major villains of Superman. And eventually, basically the entire run is Superman chasing Doomsday from point A to point B, and he just does it across these 7 different issues. Superman is trying to prevent him from getting to Metropolis to cause more destruction, and so he's trying to keep him in, like, the urban areas, or the I guess, is that rural? In the rural areas. But it, does it work is the big question. And so, yeah, I thought this was pretty good. So the first, 5, 6 issues are basically just us following him chasing Doomsday. And then issue number 7, though, the finale of this, I thought was excellent. Just that iconic moment at the end is something that I'm glad I finally now have been a part of or enjoyed, because it was really, really cool to see the iconic end of this book. So I recommend it for that alone, but not the best thing I've ever read. So, it's worthwhile if you are interested in Superman, if you want to read it once, definitely check it out. Otherwise, probably not something you would stick with you too terribly often, other than that final issue of this run. So I gave The Death of Superman 3.5 out of 5 stars. Normally, I go through these book wrap-ups in the order I completed them, but I am going to switch things up a little bit just because I read, like, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of one graphic novel series, and I read Book 1 and Book 2 of this middle grade series that I'm going to talk about now, so I'll just combine them together for the sake of ease. So next up, we have The Sixth Sense Secrets from Beyond. I finished reading Book 1, Survivor, and Book 2, Runaway. So if you watched my June TBR, you will have seen this book on here. I actually finished this on the last day of the month, so I'm including it here, and to replace it will be Book 3. So I'm not going to talk too terribly much about these because I am going to do a full trilogy review of this series once I finish the 3rd book. But I will talk a little bit about them here. So, The Sixth Sense, Secrets from Beyond, this series takes place after the events of the film. And Cole is, living life as I think he's in middle school at this point. He's just living life. But, obviously, he still sees dead people. So, The Survivor is the story of him and his buddy. They're on a school field trip. They witness a plane crash into one of the buildings next to them. And the cops, they want to question everyone that may have seen these events happen. But for some reason, the detective, who was James Brown, no relation to the singer, as he says, he just has a feeling that Cole knows more than he's telling him, and sticks with him. The whole premise behind this was so ridiculous. But if you let that go, then it's a pretty decent read. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it was okay. And then Runaway takes place right after Survivor, and this one is about that same friend that Cole hangs out with. He really only has one friend, and his older brother runs away, and so Cole is trying to help his friend find his older brother, basically doing the job that the police can't, essentially. So this one was a little bit better, but it doesn't feel really like a Sixth Sense story, because there's not a whole lot of ghost action going on in this one. So I will say that I gave Survivor 3 out of 5 stars, and I gave Runaway 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy Runaway more than Survivor, but I will elaborate on this in my full trilogy review to see if this crazy series that shouldn't even exist, if it is worth existing. So we'll talk more about that later. But again, 3 stars for Survivor and 3.5 for Runaway. Next up was a digital graphic novel that I read thanks to Hoopla, and this was a sequel to something I talked about last month and did a review for last month, which I had every intention to do a separate standalone review for this, but it isn't worth my time anymore. So this is V-Wars Volume 2, All of Us Monsters, and this is written by Jonathan Mabry. So I loved the first volume. I was so shocked by just kind of the depth that it brought to the table, even though it is just a vampire story, but it does so much more than that. With Volume 2, you kind of get just that surface level vampire war story, and it is a major letdown after the height that Volume 1 took us. So we are essentially picking up, at the end of the first volume, which I won't give any spoilers or anything, and we're just continuing to follow the story, and obviously this is the end of the series, so you would want some type of conclusion at the end. Really, my biggest problem with this Volume 2 is that it feels like the writers didn't know, or Jonathan Mabry didn't realize that the story had to end after issue 11, because everything gets wrapped up so quickly, and it just feels so rushed and so forced by issue 10, 11 that it's completely uninteresting. That said, what would it be? Like the first few issues of this, the first couple, so I guess it would be like 6 and 7 or something like that, 6, 7, 8. They move so slowly and do so little to add to the world that Mabry has created in Volume 1 that I question why they even existed. I was so disappointed with this. The art style is similar, but the art itself I just didn't like it as much. It feels a little bit muddier than the first volume, not as clean. It doesn't really have the gore that the first volume does. There is some, obviously. There's a notable amount in like the first couple issues, but it just didn't have the same impact that the first volume had because I didn't care as much, I guess. So, I don't know. I did not enjoy this one. I am still interested in reading some of the short story collections that take place in this world. And I do want to watch the Netflix series, which I just haven't gotten to yet. But I was not a big fan of this. I was super disappointed after reading Volume 1. So I'm giving V-Wars Volume 2, All of Us Monsters by Jonathan Mabry, 2 out of 5 stars. Next up are 2 graphic novels I read for a read-along that I was joining with the website, one of these websites I follow on Twitter called Comics Bookcase. And they do a lot of different read-alongs. Like they did, the first one I tried to join in on was Hellboy a few years back. Then they just finished Stray Bullets, and now they're doing Doom Patrol. They've done a couple, like Animal Man was a real quick one they did in there. But now it's Doom Patrol, and so because I've heard so much about it, and I recently picked up season 1 of Doom Patrol on Blu-ray because it was cheap a couple months ago, I decided, you know what, this sounds like a good run for me to get in on, and so I'll give it a shot. I checked Comixology Unlimited, and they had a 2-month free trial, and all of Doom Patrol was on there, so I figured, this is a low-cost way to join this read-along, so let's give it a shot, see how I like it. I only made it through Volume 2. So Volume 1 is called Crawling Through the Wreckage, and Volume 2 is called The Painting That Ate Paris. And I will say I enjoyed Volume 1 more than Volume 2. So this is a superhero comic book series, but these are, I don't even know what to call them. Like, they basically go places and do things that your average superhero cannot do. They like in the painting that ain't Paris, for example, the bad guys go into this painting and try to take over the world that way. It's so confusing. I think that was my biggest qualm with this series, is that I'm not smart enough for it. It went over my head. I didn't get it. But back to my example. So they go into this painting and, Animal Man is in there. He can't go into it, but the Doom Patrol characters can, because they are just this different type of superhero. They have these unique abilities that others do not. And so that's their function. They do things that other superheroes just can't. So while I appreciated and respected this graphic novel series for what it was, I just didn't enjoy it. And I will say that this has some of the best damn artwork I have ever seen, especially from this late 80s, early 90s style. It reminds me a lot of the Sandman series, which another series I couldn't get into at all. I couldn't even finish the first volume because I just didn't like it. But I thought the art was good there, even great. Here, it takes it up a notch. It goes from great to excellent. Like, it is genuinely some of the most stunning panels, some of the most stunning pages I have ever seen in the comic medium. So kudos to it for that. That's fantastic. And it might be worth reading for that alone. That's up to you to decide. But for me, it didn't do it for me. I feel like everything I've read from Grant Morrison, I've just not enjoyed, which is really unfortunate, because I know that Grant Morrison is one of the most well-respected comic writers out there, but he is very abstract, and that's what this series is super abstract. I appreciated it, but I didn't enjoy it. So I decided, with this read along, why waste my time with something that I'm not enjoying? It was a drag to pick up my, Kindle device, or whatever I'm using to read my graphic novels and read through them, because I just wasn't enjoying myself. So why waste time with something I'm not enjoying? So I decided if I wasn't connected to it by the end of volume 2, I would just cut ties with the read along and move on. So that's what I did. So that read along is still going on. If you are interested, it uses the hashtag #OnDoomPatrol, and it's led by Comics Bookcase on Twitter. If you are interested, definitely check it out. So I ended up giving volume 1 of Doom Patrol 3 out of 5 stars, and I gave volume 2 2 out of 5 stars. Next up is the only audiobook that I finished last month, and this is Stephen King's Joyland. So I do have a full review of this on the channel if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on this book, so I won't spend a ton of time here, but I will say that this one blew me away. It was so much more than I was expecting. In Joyland, we are being told the story of the narrator's 21st year, and it was the year he spent the summer at the titular Joyland, and some crazy things happened to him, and it's fascinating. So this book is sold as a crime story because it's sold by Hard Case Crime, which is a publisher, as I've mentioned 100 times, that I just love. But it is not a crime story. It's barely a crime story. And frankly, it's barely even a mystery. But if you were to have to classify it as something, it would probably be that. Really, what I think it is a character study. And the characters that are introduced here by King are just so interesting to read. The setting is awesome. I love this book so much. So basically, there is a murder that happened a few years before our narrator reaches Joyland. And one of the rides may or may not be haunted, and just some weird things happen with that. They sort of kind of try to solve a mystery, but if you are a person that likes to read along and solve the mystery yourself before the main character does, you're going to be disappointed because King doesn't really lay out the steps to do that or the clues to do that. So that's not what this is about. This is a bona fide character study. So if you start the book and you don't like the main character, shut it off. Don't waste your time because it's not worth it. I loved it, and I thought the narrator was excellent. The audiobook narrator was excellent. I loved it. So check out my more of my thoughts, with my full review. But I will say I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. It's a fantastic book. Next up is the book that was intended to be the sequel to Star Wars: A New Hope, we have Alan Dean Foster's Splinter of the Mind's Eye. So Foster is the one who wrote the novelization for Star Wars A New Hope, which I talked about last month in my wrap-up video. And he was signed on to do 2 novels, this being the second one. And the idea here was that if Star Wars bombed at the box office, they would be able to use this as a low-budget sequel. And so Foster wrote this book with that in mind. And what's so fascinating about this is that, of course, Star Wars, blew up and became huge at the box office. So Empire Strikes Back came next. But this one, technically, can still fit into the canon of Star Wars. Now, I talk the pre-Disney canon, because obviously once Disney bought the rights to Star Wars, the only things that were considered canon at that point were the films, and I think like the Clone Wars TV series or something. But all these old books are now considered Legends line, so they are not canon. But canon or not, it doesn't really matter. This would still technically fit between, it's like 2 years after A New Hope and then before Empire Strikes Back. So, I thought this was fascinating. So we get, a lot of the returning characters with, C-3PO, R2-D2, Princess Leia, Luke, but Han Solo is nowhere to be found because Harrison Ford did not sign on for a second film, so he was not in the sequel in case they didn't have him. But this is such an interesting book, and I do have a full review of this written, so I'll kind of leave it there. But definitely check out, once I get through all these wrap-ups for May, this will be one of the first reviews that goes live, so definitely check out my channel for that in the future. But basically, in this one, Luke and Leia, they end up crash landing on a planet, and they discover that there's this gemstone that if you have a bit of the Force within you, it can do a whole heck of a lot to amplify that. So they decide they better get it before good old Vader does. So that's what they're trying to do. That's a very basic and really a bad summary of it, but that's the general idea. So I really enjoyed this. Seek this out if you're interested in the Star Wars universe. It is fascinating. So I gave Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster 4 out of 5 stars, and check for my full review in the coming weeks. Next up is another sequel to a book that I ended up reading last month, and that is Animorphs number 2, The Visitor, written by K.A. Applegate. So I will mention there is a full review for book number 1 in this series, The Invasion, on the channel, so check that out if you're interested. And I do have this full review written. It's just a matter of getting through these wrap-ups, and then I can post that guy. So this book takes place right after the events of the first one, so I won't give any spoilers for the first book at all. But we are now following the narrator is Rachel. So instead of it being Jake, it's now Rachel, and we're seeing things through her eyes. I really enjoy how we get these different narrators, and it's going to be interesting to go through the series and see which child or which, Animorph I enjoy the most from a narration perspective. So we'll see as we go. But I really like this one. Again, in the second book, kind of what makes it uniquely Rachel is that she's basically trying to help her best friend, or former best friend, I guess you'd say. They've lost touch recently due to everything that's going on. But so she turns into a cat, as you can see here. That's a big one of the big morphs in this book. But I don't know. I really enjoyed this one. I won't talk again too much about it. I don't want to give spoilers for book 1. As I mentioned, I do have a full review for this book already written, so check that out. It should drop sometime late next week. So check back to the channel if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on that. But I did give Animorphs book number 2, The Visitor by K.A. Applegate, 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so that's going to do it for my May reading wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a good month, getting through 9 books, including 2 adult novels, so that was pretty awesome. I'm very happy with my progress last month. So let me know down in the comments below, what did you read last month? What did you love? What did you hate? Have you read any of the books I just talked about? What did you think of them? I'd love to hear more and have more of a conversation with you guys down in the comments below. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. And if not, thank you anyway for watching. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for today. I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.